There's a myth that haunts the Western imagination, a warning whispered through the millennia, the story of Icarus, a young man who, freed from the labyrinth, is given wings of wax and feathers by his father, Daedalus. The instruction was clear: do not fly too low, for the sea's dampness will weigh down your wings. Do not fly too high, for the sun will melt the wax. Icarus, overtaken by the exhilaration of flight, by the godlike sensation of soaring above mortals, forgot the warning. He ascended. He neared the sun, the source of all light and heat. And then, the fall. The wax melted, the feathers scattered, and the sea received his body. This is not just a story about youthful disobedience. It is the perfect clinical metaphor for one of the greatest dangers of the psychological journey: psychic inflation. Hello, and welcome to a deep journey into the territory where the divine and the human dangerously collide. Today, we will explore what Carl Jung identified as a swelling of the ego, a state of possession where the personality becomes arrogant, dilated, and perilously disconnected from reality. We will analyze what happens when the ego, the small center of our consciousness, dares to say, I am not just the master of my house, but I am the sage, I am the hero, I am God himself. This is a video about delusions of grandeur, about the Messiah complex, but more importantly, about the difficult path to avoiding it. Inflation is not a sign of strength. It is a sign that the ego has been overwhelmed by a contact with the unconscious that it could not assimilate. It is the moment when, upon touching the numinous, the treasure of the archetypes, we are not illuminated, but set ablaze. The journey of individuation, the process of becoming who we truly are, is fraught with traps, and inflation is the most seductive of all, for it disguises itself as spiritual success. It offers us power, certainty, and an absolute sense of purpose, while in the shadows, it prepares our collapse. What exactly is this swelling? Jung describes it as a state where the ego appropriates contents that do not belong to it, but rather to the collective unconscious, or perhaps to the self, the totality of the psyche. Imagine the manager of a small branch office who suddenly believes he is the CEO of the entire multinational corporation. He begins to make decisions far beyond his remit, to display an authority he does not possess, and inevitably, he runs his small branch into the ground. The inflated ego acts in the same way. It loses the essential humility of its position. It forgets that it is only a part of the totality, and not the totality. And why does this happen? Often, inflation arises after a significant success or a profound spiritual experience. It could be a meditation that opens a new perception, a vivid dream, a resounding professional success, or the beginning of a deep study, like that of psychology itself. The individual feels they have discovered a truth, and the next, almost imperceptible step is to believe that they are that truth. They did not have a vision, they are the visionary. They did not channel wisdom, they are the sage. This identification is the wax on Icarus's wings. It is what makes us believe we can fly to the sun without consequences. In the coming minutes, we will dissect this process. We will understand the vital difference between the ego and the self, analyze the specific archetypes that most commonly possess us, the sage and the hero, and trace the profile of the Messiah complex. Most importantly, we will see how the psyche itself, through a painful mechanism called deflation, forces us back to earth, often through crisis. If you are on a journey of self-knowledge, this video may be Daedalus's warning. If you feel this kind of deep exploration is valuable, I ask you to consider subscribing and turning on notifications, as together we are trying to build a map of this labyrinth. Let's begin by defining the coordinates. What is the ego and what is the self? To understand inflation, we must first understand the geography of the Jungian psyche. We often use the word I lightly, but in analytical psychology, the I is complex. We have, first of all, the ego. Think of the ego as the captain of a ship. It is the center of consciousness. It is the identity complex that says I am Gutenberg or I am Maria. It makes the day-to-day decisions, perceives the outer world through the senses, stores memories, and gives us a sense of continuity. The ego is the I we are most familiar with. It is vital. Without a strong, functional ego, we are unable to navigate reality. we would be dissolved in the chaos of impressions and impulses. The ego builds the walls of our persona, the social mask we wear to interact with the world. The problem, however, is that the ego tends to believe that it is the entire ship. It looks at the small map on its desk and believes that map is the ocean. It forgets that, beneath it, there is a vast crew, an immense cargo hold, and the deep, mysterious ocean itself upon which it floats. That ocean, that entire ship, is the self. The self is the central archetype of totality. It is the God within, the center and circumference of the entire psyche, including the conscious, the ego, and the unconscious, personal and collective. The ego should, ideally, be in service to the self. The goal of individuation is not to destroy the ego, nor is it to make the ego become the self. The goal is to establish a functional axis between the two. The ego must become a conscious, willing servant of the totality, the self. The self communicates with the ego through dreams, synchronicities, and intuitions. It is the compass. The ego is the captain who reads the compass and adjusts the rudder. Psychic inflation occurs when this relationship collapses. It occurs when the captain, the ego, finds an ancient map in the hold, the unconscious, showing the location of a legendary island, an archetype. Instead of using this map to navigate the ship, the self, toward a greater destiny, the captain declares, "I discovered this map, therefore, I am the greatest explorer of all time. I am the island itself." The ego, at this moment, is no longer reading the compass. It believes it is the compass. It identifies with the self. It appropriates the power and wisdom of the totality and claims them as its own. This is a usurpation. It is a psychological coup d'etat. When the ego does this, it disconnects itself from the regulatory source of the self. It loses corrective feedback. The self knows the limits of being human. It knows the shadow. The inflated ego, however, denies both. It sees itself as limitless and purely good, or purely powerful. This is the lost compass. The captain is now navigating based on his own grandeur, and the ship is heading for the rocks. Why would the ego do this? Because the ego's position is inherently unstable. The ego is small and terrified by the vastness of the unconscious and the inevitability of death. When the self manifests, when we have a numinous experience, a vision of the whole, the energy is overwhelming. The ego has two choices. Either it bows in humility before this greater force, recognizing itself as a small part of it, or it desperately tries to contain and possess that energy to alleviate its own feeling of smallness. The second option is inflation. It is the manic defense against our own insignificance. The inflated ego is, paradoxically, a weak ego, not a strong one. A truly strong ego is flexible. It can bow before the self. The weak ego is rigid. It must inflate to protect its fragile structure from the overwhelming reality of the unconscious. This is why, as Jung pointed out, inflation is a regression. It is a return to an infantile, almost magical, state of omnipotence, where the baby believes it and the world are one. The inflated individual is, psychologically, a toddler playing with the fire of the gods. And fire, invariably, burns. The tragedy is that the ego, in trying to be everything, loses the only thing it truly possessed, its own humanity. Inflation does not rise from nothing. It is not born in a vacuum. It is almost always preceded by a significant event, a plunge, voluntary or not, into the deep waters of the unconscious. Jung called these waters the collective unconscious, the reservoir of all human experience, inherited and shared by all of us, expressed through primordial images, the archetypes. Contact with this realm is what Rudolf Otto called the numinous experience. It is the mysterium, tremendum et fascinans, the mystery that awes and terrifies us. It is the moment when Pandora opens the box, or when the spiritual seeker, through meditation, deep therapy, the use of psychedelics, or simply a life crisis, cracks open the door to the unconscious, and what emerges? Contents of unbelievable power. The individual may be flooded with visions of cosmic beauty, with feelings of unity with the universe, or with a sudden intellectual understanding of the structure of reality. They touch the archetype of the sage, the hero, the great mother, or God itself. This energy is called mana, or power. It is a neutral, but immensely potent, psychic energy. The problem lies in assimilation. The ego, our poor conscious captain, is like a small electrical transformer designed for 110 volts. The numinous experience is a 10-0-volt lightning strike. If the ego is not properly grounded, if it lacks humility, if it lacks a supportive community, if it lacks a strong ethical structure, the transformer explodes. The explosion is psychic inflation. The ego cannot contain the energy. It is possessed by it. It cannot integrate the experience. It identifies with it. The fragile, human I is obliterated and replaced by an archetypal caricature. The individual no longer thinks, I had a profound experience of unity. They think, I am unity. I have understood what Buddha and Christ understood. I am, therefore, like them. This is the fatal moment. It is the opening of Pandora's box, and along with hope, the vision of totality. All evils are released, the primary one being hubris, arrogance. The individual feels chosen. They feel special, separate, and most dangerously, superior to other mortals who are still asleep. Inflation is, therefore, a failure of psychological digestion. It's like swallowing a raw diamond. You don't become rich, you just destroy your digestive system. The diamond must be cut, polished, and set into a piece of jewelry, the ego's structure, so that it can be worn without destroying the wearer. Assimilation requires time, pain, reflection, and above all, the acceptance that the experience was not yours. The ego did not produce the vision, it was graced with it. It was a witness, not the author. The inflated person confuses authorship with witness. They become the self-proclaimed spokesperson for the divine. But what they are really expressing is an ego that has been scorched by the sun. The paradox is that this numinous contact is essential for individuation. We cannot become whole without confronting the unconscious. We must open the box, but we must do so with preparation and respect. Jung compared it to diving into the ocean. You need a diving suit, a strong ego, a safety line to the ship, your connection to reality and others, and an oxygen supply, your daily practices, your humility. The person who inflates is the one who jumps off the boat naked, screaming that they have learned to breathe underwater, only to drown a few meters below the surface. This first contact is the great test, and failing it leads us directly into possession by specific figures. Let's look at the two most common, the sage and the hero. If this analysis of the delicate relationship between the conscious and the unconscious resonates with you, I ask you to leave a comment. How do you see the difference between being inspired and being possessed? Your perspective enriches our investigation. When Pandora's box is opened, one of the most seductive figures that can emerge is the archetype of the sage or the senex, the wise old man. This is the personification of knowledge, truth, meaning, and spirit. In our dreams, he appears as a guru, a teacher, a magician, or a priest. He holds the answer to the riddle of life. On the journey of individuation, encountering this archetype is a milestone. It offers us the accumulated wisdom of humanity. Contact with it brings us clarity, gives us a philosophy of life, helps us see patterns where before we only saw chaos. The energy associated with it is what Polynesians call mana, spiritual power, authority, divine prestige. The mortal danger occurs when the ego, instead of listening to the sage, decides that it is the sage. This is inflation by spirit. The individual no longer says, I learned something, but I know everything. The ego identifies with the mana of the archetype. It is no longer seeking truth, it is the truth. And of course, if it is the truth, everyone who disagrees with it is fundamentally wrong, lost, still in darkness. We see this everywhere. We see it in the academic who becomes arrogant, believing their intellect places them above others. We see it in the cult leader who, after a genuine vision, begins to believe they are an infallible channel for God, demanding absolute obedience. We see it, tragically, in the young student of philosophy or psychology who, after reading a few deep books, begins to diagnose everyone around them, treating their friends and family as study projects, not as human beings. This is the inflated sage. He is cold, distant, and disconnected from eros, the principle of human relationship. He has brilliant insights, but is incapable of love, incapable of maintaining a real relationship, because relationships require mutuality, and the inflated sage does not see others. He sees only disciples or the ignorant. He uses knowledge not to heal or connect, but as a weapon of power and control. The inflated sage is dogmatic. He quotes Jung, Nietzsche, or any other master, not as an exploration, but as gospel. He creates an intellectual fortress to protect himself from real life, from confusion, from pain, and from his own stupidity. Because, deep down, the inflated sage is terrified of his own shadow, his own ignorance. Intellectual arrogance is a defense against the feeling of inadequacy. The true sage, the archetype in its pure form, is humble. He knows how vast the ocean of the unknown is. Socrates, the archetype of the philosopher, knew only that he knew nothing. The inflated sage, on the other hand, is absolutely certain. He has the final system, the definitive answer. He stopped learning the moment he declared himself wise. The psyche, of course, does not tolerate this stagnation. The inflated sage will inevitably meet his nemesis. Life will present him with a problem that his wisdom cannot solve, usually a problem of love, health, or money, a deeply human and irrational problem. He will be forced to confront the fact that his beautiful intellectual systems are useless in the face of the complexity of the human soul. He will be forced to feel, to be vulnerable, to admit he does not know. This is the collapse of the inflated sage. It is the moment he realizes that knowing about water does not quench thirst. The cure for this specific inflation is the return to eros, to feeling, to connection with the other. It is to descend from the mountain of the intellect and return to the village, to the valley of the soul, as James Hillman would put it. It is to stop trying to fix people with knowledge and to simply be with them. It is to accept one's own foolishness as an essential part of wisdom. But there is another form of inflation, perhaps even more common in our action-obsessed culture, inflation by the hero. If the sage is inflation by spirit, the hero is inflation by will. The archetype of the hero is the driving force in the psyche that seeks to overcome adversity, slay the dragon, rescue the maiden, the anima, the soul, and establish a new kingdom. It is the archetype of action, competence, courage, and sacrifice. The ego, in its initial journey, needs to identify with the hero. This is how we separate from the parental matrix, how we find our place in the world, how we build a career and an identity. The ego hero is necessary. The danger, the inflation, occurs when the ego refuses to abandon this identity, even when the task is complete. It identifies permanently with the hero. It is the dragon's lair, and if it is the dragon's lair, it needs dragons to slay. If there are no external dragons, it will invent them. The inflated hero is the man or woman who sees the world in absolute terms of good and evil, light and dark, and he, of course, is always on the side of light. His mission is to fix the world, to save others, to fight corruption. But what he is really doing is projecting his own shadow, his own inner darkness, onto the outer world. He refuses to look at the evil within himself. The dragon he needs to slay is not in the world, it is in his own heart. But to admit this would be the end of his heroic identity. The inflated hero is driven by hubris, arrogance against the gods, the belief that his will can subjugate reality. He is the CEO who believes he can control the market, the politician who believes he can create utopia, the activist who believes only his methods are pure. He denies his own human limits. He doesn't need sleep, doesn't need help, doesn't need love. He only needs a mission. The tragic consequence is that the inflated hero, in his blind quest to destroy evil, becomes evil himself. He becomes tyrannical, relentless, and destructive. He sacrifices real people in the name of his abstract ideals. He destroys his family in the name of saving the world. He becomes the very dragon he swore to kill. The shadow he refused to integrate. His rage, his envy, his lust, his desire for power now controls him from behind. He becomes a puppet of the archetype, and the result is destruction. Think of Anakin Skywalker becoming Darth Vader in his quest for power to save Padme. Think of revolutionary leaders who, after seizing power, become worse tyrants than those they overthrew. This is the cycle of the inflated hero. The cure for this inflation is radically different from that of the sage. The sage needed to descend into the valley of Eros. The hero needs to stop. He needs to drop the sword. He needs to accept his own powerlessness, his own darkness, his own guilt. He needs to stop doing and start being. He needs to recognize that the world does not need to be saved by him. He needs to rescue himself, not from the world, but from his own arrogance. The hero's journey does not end when he slays the dragon. It ends when he returns home and becomes an ordinary citizen, integrating the wisdom he has won into daily life. The inflated hero is the one who slays the dragon and decides to live in the treasure cave, polishing his gold and telling everyone how great he is. He fails the last and most important step, the humble return. When this hero inflation is not checked, it can metastasize into its most extreme and dangerous form. When the identification with the archetype, be it the sage or the hero, or a mixture of both, becomes total, we enter the territory of psychosis. This is the Messiah complex. Here, the ego is not just inflated, it has been completely annihilated and replaced by the archetype. The individual no longer believes they have a divine mission. They believe they are divinity itself. They are the savior, the redeemer, the returned Messiah. This is the point of total rupture with reality. The individual now inhabits a purely symbolic world. Ordinary people are no longer seen as their peers, but as sheep to be led or demons to be fought. The individual with a Messiah complex loses all capacity for self-reflection. Any criticism is not seen as feedback, but as persecution, proof of the world's evil and their own righteousness. They are, in Jung's words, hopelessly right. This absolute certainty is the pathognomonic symptom. The inflated ego might still have occasional doubts, might still have moments of clarity. The Messiah has no doubts. He has a direct line to God, or he is God. He speaks in absolutes. He promises total salvation or total destruction. Historically, we see this in figures like Jim Jones or Charles Manson, individuals who, most likely, had a genuine numinous contact at some point, but were completely devoured by it. They could not ground the energy, and it made them psychotic. They created cults, micro-realities where their inflation was law, and anyone who challenged that law was punished or expelled. The Messiah complex is the most tragic form of inflation because recovery is almost impossible. Without a total collapse, the individual is so identified with the archetype of the self, the God within, that they become a walking God. But as Jung noted, I would rather be a whole man than a God in pieces. The Messiah complex is a God in pieces. It is a fragmented ego, possessed by a single archetypal idea. What makes this so relevant today? We live in a culture that encourages inflation. The culture of social media, of personal branding, of the influencer. We are all encouraged to become heroes of our own stories, to become gurus of our own niches. The digital platform gives us a global stage, allowing our inflation to be applauded by thousands. The like is the fuel for the inflated ego. The individual who posts spiritual truths daily, who presents themselves as a model of virtue and wisdom, is in constant danger. They begin to believe their own created persona. They can no longer be wrong, can no longer be human, can no longer have a bad day. They become a slave to the messianic image they have projected. The Messiah complex today may not look like a cult leader in the desert. It may look like a wellness influencer, a life coach, or a crypto guru who promises wealth and enlightenment, demanding blind faith in their system. The danger is the same, the loss of the human soul for both the Messiah and their followers, who project their own desire for salvation onto them, avoiding the hard work of their own individuation. Recognizing this tendency in ourselves is vital. If you are on a journey of self-knowledge, this exploration is an invitation to humility. If you are finding value in this analysis, a like on the video helps us reach more people who may be struggling with these very forces. It is a signal that the search for grounded truth is still valued. How then can we recognize psychic inflation, either in ourselves or others, before it reaches the messianic level? There are clear signs, symptoms that the inflated ego exhibits, often disguised as virtues. The first and most important symptom, as we've touched upon, is absolute certainty. The inflated individual has lost the ability to say I don't know or I might be wrong. They operate from a position of divine authority. Doubt, which is the essential tool of the healthy ego for navigating reality, is seen as weakness or a lack of faith. They have the answer for everything. From global politics to their friends' personal problems, they do not converse. They proclaim. The second symptom is a growing contempt for the ordinary. The inflated person feels above mundane concerns. They may neglect their job, their finances, their personal hygiene, or their relationships because they are busy with higher matters, their spiritual mission, their great work. They develop a subtle or not so subtle disdain for ordinary mortals, the unenlightened, who still worry about banal things like paying bills or raising children. This reveals a dangerous disconnection from anima mundi, the soul of the world, the earthly reality. Third, there is a loss of humor, specifically the inability to laugh at oneself. The inflated ego is terribly serious. Its identity is so grandiose and so fragile that it cannot stand the slightest pinprick. Self-irony is impossible, as it would imply perspective, a distance between the ego and the archetype. The inflated individual has no such distance. They are the serious thing. They may laugh at others, a laugh of contempt, but never at themselves. Fourth symptom, progressive isolation. The inflated individual pulls away from old friends and family who knew them before. Why? Because these people reflect their humanity, their flaws, their common past. They are a reminder that he is not a god, but just John or Mary. He replaces them with a circle of admirers, disciples, or followers who reflect his new grandiose identity. He creates an echo chamber where his inflation is not challenged. Fifth, the use of language. The inflated person begins to speak in abstractions or jargon. They use words like consciousness, energy, the universe, the source in a vague and grandiloquent way. Language loses its precision and becomes an instrument of power and obfuscation. It does not seek to communicate, but to impress or intimidate. It becomes oracular. Finally, there is a total denial of the shadow. The inflated individual sees themselves as purely good, ethical, and correct. Any flaws or mistakes are rationalized, justified, or projected onto others. If something goes wrong, it is always the fault of the system, the enemies, or the low vibration of others. They are incapable of taking personal responsibility for their failures, as this would crack the divine persona. Recognizing these symptoms in oneself is extremely painful. It requires brutal honesty. Have you become the wisest person in your circle, but also the loneliest? Are you absolutely certain of your beliefs, to the point of feeling anger or contempt for those who disagree? Have you stopped laughing at your own quirks? If the answer is yes, you may be hearing the sun warm the wax on your wings. Inflation is a state of alienation from one's own soul, but the psyche has a failsafe, a brutal but effective immune system to deal with this infection. The psyche, as a homeostatic system, seeks balance. Inflation is an extreme imbalance. The ego has stolen fire from the gods like Prometheus and now considers itself divine. The psyche must correct this. This corrective principle is what the Greeks called nemesis, the divine retribution against hubris. In Jungian psychology, we call it enantiodromia, the principle that everything, when pushed to its extreme, inevitably turns into its opposite. Extreme light generates the deepest darkness. Absolute power generates absolute powerlessness. The inflated sage will become the fool. The inflated hero will become the villain. The fall is not a maybe. It is a certainty. The punishment does not come from an external, angry God. It comes from within. It is the natural consequence of violating the laws of psychic reality. It is gravity. Icarus was not punished by the sun. He was a victim of the laws of physics. The inflated ego is not punished by the self. It is a victim of the laws of the psyche. How does this fall manifest? In various ways. It could be a humiliating financial collapse for the guru who felt above money. It could be a debilitating physical illness for the hero who denied his body. It could be a public scandal that exposes the hypocrisy of the saint. It could be a painful divorce that breaks the heart of the sage who thought he understood everything about relationships. But most commonly, the fall is internal, an overwhelming depression. Depression in this context is not a disease to be cured, but a bitter medicine. It is the forced deflation. The energy that sustained the inflation runs out, and the ego plummets from solar heights into the cold, dark sea. Grandiosity is replaced by a crushing feeling of worthlessness. Absolute certainty is replaced by paralyzing doubt. This is the moment when Prometheus is chained to the rock, and the eagle reality comes to peck at his liver every day. This dark night of the soul is the only possible cure for inflation. It is the painful process where the ego is forced to confront the limits it denied. It is forced to relearn its humanity. It is forced to feel its pain, its smallness, its dependency. Many do not survive this fall intact. They become cynical, bitter, or desperately try to inflate again, seeking a new truth or a new mission to cling to. But for those who endure the process, who accept the punishment not as vengeance, but as a correction, something new can be born. The fall is what allows the ego to be remade, this time not of wax, but of a stronger material. It is what allows the ego, finally, to find its proper place in the universe. Inflation was the attempt to steal fire. Deflation is the chance to learn how to light a candle. This process is the return. It is the second half of the journey. And how do we navigate it? Deflation is the grounding process. It is the return of Icarus to Earth, not as a flying god, but as a soaked, humbled survivor. This is the hardest work of individuation. Inflation is ecstatic. Deflation is agonizing. The first step in healing inflation is to accept deflation. It is to resist the temptation to blame the world, enemies, or the gods for your fall. It is to look at one's own arrogance and say, I did this. I flew too high. This requires an almost superhuman humility, the very humility that was lacking during the inflation. The second step is shadow work. Inflation is caused by the denial of the shadow. The cure, therefore, lies in the integration of the shadow. The individual must, painfully, look at everything they projected onto others. The sage must accept his stupidity. The hero must accept his cowardice and his cruelty. The Messiah must accept his profound selfishness. This is the work of eating one's own shadow, of recognizing that the evil he saw in the world was a reflection of the unacknowledged evil within him. It is dirty work, unglamorous, which wins no applause. It is done in the silence of the therapist's office or in the solitude of one's personal journal. Third, one must return to the body and the everyday. The inflated ego lives in the world of abstract ideas and grand missions. The cure lies in the concrete, the mundane. Jung often advises inflated patients to do simple things: cook a meal, tend the garden, fix an object, focus on their boring job. Why? Because these activities force the ego to deal with physical reality, with limits, with things that do not obey its grandiose will. You cannot will the bread to rise faster. You have to wait for the yeast. This teaches patience and humility. It is what Zen monks call chopping wood and carrying water. Even after enlightenment, the mundane work continues. It is what keeps us grounded. Fourth, it is essential to restore eros, the principle of relationship. The inflated individual lives in a monologue. The cure requires dialogue. He needs to learn to listen, to connect with others as equals, to ask for help, to be vulnerable. He needs to repair the relationships his arrogance destroyed. He must realize that individuation is not a solitary journey to the mountaintop. It is a process that happens in relationship with the community, with the other. True wisdom is not found in the guru's solitude, but in the messy complexity of human love. This process of deflation is not about destroying the ego. It is about resizing it. It is about transforming it from an inflated tyrant into a functional partner of the self. Inflation is the ego saying, I am the self. Painful deflation leads to a new consciousness, where the ego can finally say, I serve the self. And this is the ultimate goal of the entire journey. We have reached the end of our exploration. We have seen the flight and fall of Icarus as the anatomy of psychic inflation. We saw how the ego, in its weakness, tries to usurp the power of the self and the archetypes, identifying with the sage or the hero, leading to delusions of grandeur and the Messiah complex. We saw how the psyche, through an anxiedromia, throws us into deflation, the painful dark night that serves as the only antidote. So what is the alternative? If contact with the unconscious is so dangerous, should we avoid it? Should we remain in the safe labyrinth of ordinary consciousness? For Jung, the answer would be a resounding no. Avoiding the unconscious is not safety. It is stagnation. It is an unlived life. True individuation, the process of becoming a whole, indivisible individual, requires contact with the self. The question is not if we should dive, but how. The alternative to inflation is not ignorance. The alternative to inflation is assimilation. True individuation lies in the ego's ability to differentiate itself from the self, while at the same time maintaining a living relationship with it. It is the difference between being possessed by an archetype and being in dialogue with it. The healthy ego does not say, "I am the sage." It says, "I am grateful for the wisdom, the archetype of the sage that manifested through me in this moment." It does not say, "I am the hero who will save the world." It says, "I will use my strength, the archetype of the hero, to do my small human work as best I can, right here and now." The difference is subtle in language, but abyssal in psychological orientation. It is the difference between arrogance and reverence. Inflation is the ego trying to be the center of the universe. Individuation is the ego finding its correct place in the universe as a conscious servant of the totality, the self. Inflation is a quest for power. Individuation is a quest for wholeness. The result of inflation is collapse, ruin, and isolation. The result of individuation is resilience, creativity, and a deep connection to humanity. It is the ability to be, at the same time, unique and common, extraordinary in one's vision and profoundly ordinary in one's daily life. We do not fly to the sun. We do not crawl in the darkness of the sea. We learn, as Daedalus instructed, to fly the middle path, the path of consciousness, grounded in reality, but inspired by the divine, a path of unending humility. Thank you for joining me on this journey.